From the Hagee Ministry Studio in San Antonio, Texas, join us for The Difference with author and leadership strategist Erik Van Alstine as we explore the power of perception.
The average amount of drama for the average worker in America, get this, 2 hours and 26 minutes a day of drama. That's why 7 out of 10 people are looking for a different job. 7 out of 10 people want to think about quitting their jobs every single day.
How would you like to cut the drama at home and in the workplace? I'm all in for this one. So on today's show, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence with Erik Van Alstine and how to live a better life now.
You know, a lot of people would love to cut the drama, but they don't realize the role that they play in doing it. We recently asked some folks in some man-on-the-street moments what they had to say about the subject.
Emotional intelligence. Let me think.
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not a girl, I'm a guy, so I'm gonna get in trouble just for saying that.
Knowing how to deal with your emotion, and hopefully emotional intelligence is doing that, dealing with your emotion intelligently.
I would think emotional intelligence would speak more to your ability to control your emotions intelligently, to be able to respond to a situation with discipline, with clarity, and with wisdom, as opposed to allowing your emotions to run rampant.
Ability to work with people, but more importantly, to know what's going on inside of you. What's in your cookie jar?
Intelligence based on your emotions.
I think when you're like in high school or in first grade.
I mean, emotions are, yeah, what you feel, I guess.
Emojis.
No.
But maybe just being able to know when to know your when to feel the emotions that you have.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree with the little kid at the light pole that said no and yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he at least was, you know, certain in his answers. To me, when we're discussing the emotional quotient versus the perception is the what I see. Emotion is the why. Why do I see it that way? You know, you and I one time had a conversation about Steve Irwin, the great croc hunter.
Yes,
and his perception of reptiles. Yes. You know, what other people saw as dangerous, he would pick up and call beautiful.
Yeah, why
and,
did he love snakes?
Yeah, I mean, he'd see an 11-foot python going across the road and thought it needed to be petted instead of turned into boots. But, you know, the thing about it is the why for him was different than everybody's what. Everybody saw the same what. They saw a crocodile, they saw a snake, they saw a scorpion. He saw something that was valued and beautiful as opposed to what we saw as dangerous. Right. And so his emotional quotient had a different why. And one of the things that you've touched on in perceptual intelligence and how people process is why they feel what they feel. That's a big conversation.
That is huge because we typically have the emotions, but we don't know where it got started. It's like a kid pulling a fire alarm in a grade school, right? The alarm is going off, the kids are streaming out of class, but who pulled that alarm? We don't even know how that happened. So we are so quickly telling ourselves what this is and what it means and all those things, and then the emotions, though, remain. So we've got all this emotion, and we're not necessarily aware of why that is. Now, emotional intelligence as a definition is basically understanding your emotions and when you're having them, too. That's another thing. You can understand what emotions are, but knowing that it's like saying, I don't have a tone, and everyone's else saying, yeah, you do. You have a tone, right?
I'm not yelling.
I'm not yelling, right. So, or someone saying you're yelling when you're not, right? So it's all these sense of what is actually happening emotionally in me, what's happening emotionally in others. And emotional intelligence is great about those first two pillars, but not necessarily very good at managing emotions, which is the most important thing. And what they typically don't get is that the perceptions drive the emotions. So when you try to change the emotions, you're really hacking at the branches of the problem. You're at the surface of the problem instead of the source of the problem, and therefore you can't solve the problem, which means the drama remains. In fact, there's a study, HR studies that show, Cy Wakeman studies show that the average amount of drama for the average worker in America, get this, 2 hours and 26 minutes a day of drama, which is all kinds of the dysfunctional thinking and relating that we have at work. So more than a quarter, a third of our day is drama. That's why 7 out of 10 people are looking for a different job. 7 out of 10 people want to think about quitting their jobs every single day. And a lot of people are quitting their marriages, and the same kind of thing goes in marriage.
And, you know, the thing is, you're talking about job and marriage. I think that, you know, sometimes the emotional aspect, it's difficult to create the proper balance and barrier between the work-life balance.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
you
true
know,
too.
You have emotions at work that you have
home.
a difficult time leaving at work, you bring them home. You had a bad day at the office, so we're gonna have a bad evening around the dinner table.
Yes.
Or we're having a difficult season at home and we're
Bring
gonna
it to
carry
work.
it to work, so my attitude at work isn't what it should be because I've got a bad perspective about everything else. Emotions are not only something that you have to learn how to manage, but there are certain times where you have to learn how to put them in a compartment and leave them in that arena.
Yeah, and that's where this whole concept of the limits of the mind come into play and are very powerful. Remember I told you about the bingo ball tumbler. That's everything in our head, but only one ball at a time can go through the thought slot. So we're talking about the conscious mind can only think one thought at a time. So if we're replacing one thought with something else, then we can lock onto the constructive and block out the destructive, right? So there's all kinds of ways for us to manage the way we see, which manages the way we feel. And if we have highly constructive perceptions, we are going to have highly constructive emotions. That's just the way it is. Now, when I say constructive, keep in mind, I'm making a difference between what oftentimes people think positive emotions are good, negative emotions are bad. Could not be further from the truth. There's constructive and destructive use of all the emotions. There's a constructive love. There's a destructive love. There's a constructive happiness. Everybody thinks it's always constructive, but there's a destructive happiness. If I'm feeling like I need to leave my marriage, which could work, because I'm unhappy, and that unhappiness is not related to something horrible.
Correct.
That's a destructive happiness. If I think the grass is greener on the other side with another relationship, and I want to have that relationship because that'll make me feel happy, that's a destructive happiness. In the same way, there's constructive and destructive anger. Anger's not all destructive. There's we should be angry about certain things. Same with fear. There's constructive fear. If there's real danger, if you're on the edge of the cliff and you're going to fall off and die, if you're not afraid, something is wrong with you. I recently watched that show of the guy free soloing El Capitan. I don't even know, free soloing. This guy climbs 3,500 feet up straight granite wall without ropes. Oh. That guy doesn't have the right kind of fear. Yeah. Right?
He's obviously forgotten
like
about the reality of gravity.
I'm just saying it's an amazing story, but my point is he's actually kind of missing a constructive fear. He's fearless, but not in a way that I think is going to help him live long.
Yeah, well, and for so many people, it's understanding where those emotions come from and how to balance them that enables them to successfully navigate the life that they're living. When we come back, we're going to talk about how you can manage your emotions and the impact that they have not only on your life, but the lives of others. You don't want to miss what's coming up next. You're watching The Difference.
When we come back,
we all live in a climate of inadequate social feedback, which means if your fly's unzipped, 9 out of 10 people are going to leave it unzipped. They are not going to tell you.
Has God placed a precious dream in your heart, one that you've gently tucked away, and you wonder, what if I stumble? For your gift of any amount, we'd love to send you the Daily Truth Perpetual Calendar. And for a gift of $150 or more, you'll also receive proclamations, the Heaven in This Place CD, the Dream Journal, the Dare to Dream mug, and a beautiful peace ornament. Call the number on your screen or visit jhm.org/dream.
We're back with Erik talking about emotional intelligence and talking about emotional intelligence. How do I not sound so critical when I'm correcting like my kids or even my husband?
Well, you know, one of the things that Kendal and I often talk about is compliment before you criticize. And yet in the work that you've written on automatic influence, you talk about, pushing versus pulling. And how people, they're pushing for you, and sometimes you feel like they're pushing against you.
Yes.
And how does emotional intelligence help that kind of balance between, am I being criticized, or is this something that's going to make me better?
Yeah, I think we talk about this idea of seeing ourselves pushing for people. We kind of use this illustration of, imagine, we're pushing this table together, right? And I say, okay, you push, and I put my hand over yours, and we're pushing this table. And we do this in illustration of leadership. There's not going to be much resistance on the part of the person, because they feel like we're pushing together, as opposed to put up your hand and then let me put my hand against it. And I'm pushing. What are you doing? Pushing back. It's human nature to resist coercion. That's just the bottom line. We are supposed to be free. We're supposed to be powerful. And when people violate that, I think in many senses, they're violating a sacred right. So there's appropriate places to push, and then there's appropriate places to leave people be. And, mind your own business is actually right straight from the Bible. That's very, very helpful information. But there are times where we do need to correct people. If that person truly believes that I am pushing for them, not pushing for what's good for me, but pushing for what's good for them, and they truly believe that, then they will receive critique, even when it's forceful, as in a validating way. Think of a great coach, right? A great coach pushes his people. I mean, pushes. And yet the players do not resent it, because he knows they're being pushed to win. So the issue is, or do my children, or do the people I work with that need some input from me, know that I'm pushing for them? Do I truly have their best interests at heart? Most of the time, that's where I got to correct myself. I got to check myself, because I'm actually thinking of my own interest. What's good for me, not what's good for you. Whenever I'm actually counseling like a couple or a family, if that family or that couple's goal is to get better together, then we always know, even in the critique, let's say I've got a serious problem in an area. If my wife is talking to me about that problem, I know, because we've already had the conversation, she wants me to be a better man.
Yeah.
So I'm going to receive that in a different way. And part of it's on the receiver too. I can be trained to see even bad feedback as making me better, because I can always clarify whether it's right or wrong, and it's usually right. The people that are giving you the bad feedback are the only ones bold enough to say anything. Everyone else is too kind. They don't want to hurt your feeling. I remember there's this concept called inadequate social feedback, because we don't want to get into an embarrassing situation, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, and we don't want to create drama, because we've said stuff, it blew up. We all know what that's like. I'm not going there again. We all live in a climate of inadequate social feedback, which means if your fly's unzipped, 9 out of 10 people are going to leave it unzipped. They are not going to tell you. So there's all these circumstances in life where it's like, man, I wish someone would tell me this.
I would tell you. I'd be that one.
Oh, yeah, of course you would, because she wants you to be a better man. But I wouldn't.
Well, she'd probably put it on the church billboard. His fly is down.
So I'm writing about this concept of inadequate social feedback on a plane. I'm on a plane, and as God is my witness, right across the aisle, this guy drapes in with a 1.5 foot long piece of toilet paper attached to his heel, sits right next to me. I'm like, it's going to fall off eventually. So here's the point. People aren't going to say stuff because they don't want drama.
I would have helped them and just pulled it off real quick.
But nobody else would. So you're very good at this. But most people don't want, like I said, they don't want embarrassing situations. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. They don't want drama. And all you got to do is try that a couple times. It's like all you got to do is stick your finger in the light socket once, and you're done. You don't want to do that anymore.
For Kendal, because her professional career was as a nurse, she always saw people in a fragile state that she had to address the broken things so that they could get better. So she has no problem looking at, hey, that's out of place, let me help you with that. Because it's just part of her professional background and training, as where everybody else is like, well, maybe they want it that way. And maybe
you're
I should,
the 1 out of 10. 9 out of 10, like, woo, I'm out of here.
And one of the greatest frustrations for me is when somebody comes into the equation after the fact and says, I could have told you.
Okay, I just read a book by Patty McCord. She's former HR director of Netflix. So very, very powerful, effective people person solving people problems. She had this, and I quote, if you tell me that you saw a problem and you could have told someone about it before and it actually happened, I'm going to run you over in the parking lot because you did not help the organization. So there's this strong culture. By the way, Netflix is fabulous for telling the truth. Netflix people go to other companies and create lots of chaos because they tell the truth to senior executives. Like, who does this guy think he is? Oh, he's a next Netflix employee. They always told the truth. They evaluated each other, and their organization has flourished in terms of feedback because
they had
overcame
a common
that.
goal.
They had to overcome that natural tendency to just stay back and not say anything.
And you know, the Proverbs speaks to this issue, and we often quote the verse, but we seldom like to engage in the practice. Iron sharpening iron. You know, the way that iron sharpens iron is two pieces of iron go against each other's grain. They don't work in, you know, same direction, because if you take a knife and you rub it against a rod in the same direction, you dull the blade. It's only when you take it and you rub it against the grain. So it's the difference between your perspective and my perspective, your feelings and my feelings. That's how we get better, because we're rubbing against each other's grain. And we live in a society that has said, don't do that because you're going to disrupt the system.
Yeah, so I would call that constructive conflict, right? So these two things working against each other, against quote unquote, aren't really working against. They're working for. That's why everybody's sharpening their knives that way. And when I can see my wife and I getting sharper together, or you and I getting sharper together, then I'm willing to say things that other people who want to be polite won't say. The truth is, the people that are polite, but the truth is they're hurting us in the long run. That's why Patty McCord wanted to run them over, because they're hurting us.
But she probably drove like an e-car that was real light.
Yeah, it was one of those smart cars that are about as big as a toaster. Bing, you know, so I get that. But the truth is, it was hurtful. It was harmful to not say something.
Correct.
So I want my wife to be able to say something. Help me out.
Well,
and vice versa.
And do it in a manner that, again, you're working towards a common goal, which is the good of one another.
Yes.
You know, this takes us into the conversation of leading and loving. And I want to come back in our next segment and discuss that, because people often think that leadership requires power, but the truth is leadership requires enough love for the other person to take them in the right direction. We're going to be talking about more on that subject with Erik Van Alstine when we come back.
When we come back,
when we love people more, we can actually push harder. But when we don't love people, more pushing, more power means more resistance.
I'm so grateful that I chose differently. I'm so happy that I chose you. I get to see you become the person God intended you to be. Thank you, Hagee Ministry Legacy Partners.
There has never been a better time to share the love of Christ with a mother and a child than right now. When you partner with Hagee Ministries, your legacy impacts lives and transforms a nation. Call today or go to jhm.org/partner.
Welcome back to The Difference. Erik, we have been talking about emotional intelligence, and one of the greatest emotions, the Bible even says it, the greatest of these is love. And a lot of times people feel like loving and leading are working contrary to one another. But you have a perspective on that's very different. How does love and leadership work together?
Well, we do a teaching on leading with love and power, right? And I think that you could call it love versus truth, love versus leadership, love versus power. But the idea is that if you're loving, you're probably not going to be powerful. And if you're powerful, you're not going to be loving. And it's hard to see those two working together because they seem to work against each other. Isn't loving meaning that I'm gracious and forgiving and, you know, I let people step on me? And I mean, Jesus said turn the other cheek, right? So there's this question about where do you give and where do you not? And so they typically tend to think, you know, love is weak and power is strong, or leadership must be strong and love is weak. Truth must be strong, love is weak. But that's not really the case at all, because when we love people, and by loving is, I'm saying that we're seeing people as people of equal value, needs itself. We're seeing good, we're pushing for them, right? So when we love people more, we can actually push harder. But when we don't love people, more pushing, more power means more resistance, because they're going to push back. And as they I don't want to say as they should, but, it's the human nature to be free from coercion. So love and leadership should be in their strongest places together. And when leadership lacks love, what happens is strong leaders typically don't get buy-in. They get a lot of passive resistance. It's like, yeah, you're making me do this now. You're making me sit down, but I'm standing up inside for sure. And I'm going to do everything I can to subtly oppose you for the rest of time, just on the principle of justice. Because you mess with me, I'm going to mess you back. So that's what typically happens in organizational settings. A lot of resentment builds up, a lot of what I call passive resistance. You don't see them resisting you. It's not aggressive, active resistance, but they're doing it.
Yeah,
just behind
I
the
call
scenes.
it doing the right thing in the wrong way.
Yeah, or just,
Oh
looking
yeah, I'll
like
do
they're
that,
doing
but I'm going to do it with a bad attitude.
Yep, or they're gonna, they're gonna undermine you. So they'll say yes to you to your face, but behind your back, woo.
Well, in preparation for this conversation, we had some folks that we asked some questions about love and leadership and how it relates to the workplace. Let's take a look at this man on the street video.
Erik, why do I feel fearful of giving my opinion when knowing that people will not agree?
Erik, how do I control the drama in my workplace? This is crazy.
Hey, Erik, how do I deal with difficult people in my life, around me, like this person? I'm joking.
Okay, so
here we go.
Three very simple questions that I think a
Yes.
lot of people ask, but sometimes those answers aren't necessarily as easy as they sound.
Yeah, we're peeling back the onion here, and we're only going to get one layer in. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to give some more input, right?
Correct. What I would love for you to do is take the time to answer those questions, and we'll put that as a link on our Facebook page. And if you want to see what Erik has to say about those issues, then you can go and read that article on the Matt and Kendal Facebook page, and it'll take you not only there, but it'll give you opportunity to engage with erikvanalstine.com and find out more about automatic influence and how it can be an impact in your life. But to me, one of the great statements that we heard there was, I'm fearful to share my opinion when I know.
They're not going to agree.
The first half of it was a question.
Yes.
Should I or should I not share my opinion? But the last half of it was with certainty. I know they're not going to like what I have to say.
Yes.
How often do we find people create those kinds of arguments in their mind? They're already certain of the outcome, even without giving people the chance to disappoint them.
Yeah, I think it's okay to question and then find out if they really want to disagree, because they may agree, right? But, you kind of get that sense, though, you're going to go there, and you've been there before, and you know what happens. It's almost like, trying to unpack a landmine.
Yeah.
You're digging in the dirt, and you know how that goes. Eventually, you dig in there enough. Everything's going to blow up. Poison gas hissing everywhere. That's the way it goes. So I think she's talking about being fearful, and I go back to constructive fear and destructive fear. She might be fearful because there is danger.
Yeah.
So that's a constructive, useful fear. It's why people don't say anything, because they know where this goes. But I do think there's a sense of, you can be confident in your own opinion, but then on top of that, maybe you can ask for others' opinions first and listen first. Sometimes when you seek to understand and work through, you might find that there's a lot more opportunity for the opinion to work. So I think she's run into challenges in the past. She's got good reasons to be afraid, maybe some bad reasons to be afraid. That's why we're gonna have to do a little more write-up on it.
Yeah, well, I'm so thankful that you're gonna take the time to do that. One of the things that I think we should all remember is what John chapter 15 says. Jesus Christ shared it several times, and he said, "This is my commandment, love one another."
Yes.
Abide in my love. Love one another as I have loved you. And then he gets to actually one point in the chapter, he says, I've commanded these things to you that your joy may be full. And I believe that whenever we learn how to listen, love, and lead in that love, which is the way Jesus treated us, we do have a joyful and fulfilling experience in our relationships that a lot of people are lacking because rather than perfect love, they have a great fear.
Yes.
And the Bible tells us in another chapter, perfect love casts out all
That's right.
fear.
Yep. So that would be the useless fear, right?
Absolutely.
I was, this useful versus useless fear was revolutionary for me, because you even look in Scripture, fear of the Lord. There's times to be afraid. Fools go where angels fear to tread, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where fear is the thing that's wise and it's helping you avoid real danger. But then there's these other times where you should be afraid, you should be confident, and you aren't. So, like for example, this whole idea of I'm afraid what someone else might think of me. I have zero fears of that. Zero.
I can testify.
It creates problems.
It.
It creates problems, but it's also very liberating, because I know that who I am is not subject to what someone else thinks. It's like someone saying, Mount Rainier is not a mountain. Well, their opinion doesn't alter the fact. It is what it is. So I am what I am, regardless of people's opinions. So I can be free from fearing what people think about me as it relates to my identity. But then there's other things where, fear is useful. I just find it's very, very helpful to start thinking about fear in terms of 2 dimensions instead of just one. So, very powerful.
We've just touched on one of the multitude of topics that's in the content of the work that you do. You do it for corporations, you do it in a lot of organizations. You've helped our ministry and our team here. If individuals who are watching want to find out how they can engage more deeply with the content, where should they go?
Yeah, go to erikvanalstine.com. All the information's there, and we go through, we talk about how do I deal with drama at work. We have answers for that. It is fabulous. We've seen major transformation. So it's just exciting to be able to know that we're helping people. I mean, we're having some of the executives at the biggest companies in the world say, I've been in this for a long time. I've seen a lot of leadership stuff. This is moving the needle like nothing I've ever seen. So it's really awesome to be able to help people. We'll be able to do that.
One of the places where we engage in demonstrating the love of God, casting out fear, and helping others make a difference is the Sanctuary of Hope. We would love for you to watch this and find out more about it.
Has God placed a precious dream in your heart, one that you've gently tucked away? Perhaps it feels overwhelming, too big, or too costly, and you wonder, what if I stumble? Where do I begin? Take heart. When God plants a dream within you, He also gives you everything you need to make it a reality. Our part is to stay close to His Word. If God brings you to it, He will surely bring you through it. For your gift of any amount this month, we'd love to send you the Daily Truth Perpetual Calendar, a daily reminder of God's promises. And for a gift of $150 or more, you'll also receive Proclamations, the Heaven in This Place CD, the Dream Journal, the Dare to Dream mug, and a beautiful peace ornament. This holiday season, make your dream a reality. Call the number on your screen or visit jhm.org/dream.
I actually attended Cornerstone Christian schools all my life, since K4. I've received so much experience, worship, volunteering. I've really grown in this church. I think what Pastor Matt and Miss Kendal are doing with Cornerstone is so amazing. They really are changing so many people's lives, not just in San Antonio, but around the world. They're really fulfilling their mission statement to all the gospel, to all the world and generations. I think it's amazing.
For more information on Erik's insight and his answers, I want to remind you that you can go to the Matt and Kendal Hagee Facebook page and also to erikvanalstine.com. Drama is inevitable, but that doesn't mean that it's not avoidable. You can avoid it in your life when you choose how to respond. And if you respond in love instead of fear, I assure you, you're going to overcome most situations with a better outcome than you could even imagine. Thank you for joining us today on The Difference. We pray that this content was a blessing to you. Kendal and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.